You do it to yourself. Belisar walked purposefully towards the chamber, each stride precisely measured out across the smooth stone floor of the citadel. He'd had a full report from the scout, but he was determined to see it for himself. That was the first rule of leadership, Sophia had always said. Never ask someone to do something you wouldn't do yourself. It was pointless, of course. There was nothing that could be done now. But he'd sent Philemon into this tower, so now he was going too. It had to be done. He just had to get this over with. Despite his determination, he could feel himself slowing down as he approached the solid wooden door. He reached out to grasp the black iron handle, but his hand had stopped mere inches from the cold metal, unable to proceed. Philemon was battle-hardened. He'd fought in Morrow as well as Zenith. He'd witnessed the destruction of the halls of knowledge, seen the terror the Druge had unleashed on their homeland firsthand, and he'd emerged from this room looking like he'd come face to face with a basilisk. Rather than try and force himself onwards, he stopped for a moment to center himself. He focused on his breathing for a few moments, feeling the damp air slide languidly in and out of his lungs. Once he was sure of his poise, he lowered the handle and pushed the door open. Let it swing back to reveal the scene that waited for him, just as Philemon had described it. It took him a while to find the scout afterwards. He searched the camp, but there was no sign of Philemon by the fire or at his tent. Fortunately, Sabine said she'd seen him heading up towards the escarpment. It was a punishing climb, easier for a scout than a sentinel, and he was cursing his steel armor by the time he reached the summit. Damn, he was out of shape. There was a time when he could have run up this hill in this armor. Command was taking its toll on him. Too much time behind a desk. Philemon was sat on the very edge of the cliff, his feet resting over the side. For a split second, he thought the scout was going to jump, but then he remembered that the man had trained at Snow's Edge Citadel. They'd taught him to scale a mountainside with little more than his bare hands. If he'd ever had a fear of heights, he'd left it behind at the Citadel. "You've seen it, then?" he asked without turning around. The scouts liked to train by trying to identify a person by the sound of their footsteps. They reckoned it taught awareness, recognition, and recall. Crucial skills for a good scout. Philemon was one of the best. He must have known who it was before Belisar had even set eyes on him. He didn't answer, just forced himself to walk slowly up to the cliff edge. It was probably only 50 or 60 feet before the cliff face started to even out a bit, but it looked like double that to Belisar. His stomach lurched and heaved at the sight, but it was far too late for that. Nothing left to lose now. Gingerly, he copied Philemon, sitting down barely an arm's length away. The scout glanced at him, his eye repeating the question, demanding an answer. He responded with a slow, heavy nod, and then another. The two of them sat in silence for the best part of an hour before Philemon spoke. "Why do they do it?" he asked. "Do they hate us that much?" Belisar let out a long, heavy breath. There was no answer to a question like that, but Philemon already knew that. He just needed to hear a voice. "I don't know, Phil. I'm not even sure they know why they do it." After that, they fell silent once more. Eventually, the scout was ready to return to the camp, and the two of them walked back together. Philemon stared at him for a brief moment, long enough to whisper a single word of thanks before he turned in. His duty over, Belisar left him and went in search of his own tent. It would be a long night, and sleep would not be easy to find. Overview. At the winter solstice, the Imperial Synod chose to grapple with a fundamental question. What is to be done with the Druge? Death to the Druge has become commonplace in the Empire in recent years, a toast at every table, a line to end every speech in the Senate. Having considered the words of Fintan Nighthaven, the Synod chose to issue a clear rebuke to those who have embraced such language. The judgment passed with a resounding majority, despite the fact that they also came close to passing a mandate urging the Empire to embrace any tool necessary to defeat the Druge. The Druge. The Wintermarkers have led a campaign against the Jotun marked by honour and respect for their ancient enemies. Each side is given leave to reclaim the bodies of those who have fallen. Retreats are permitted, surrenders accepted. Jarl Kierheim has said the Jotun will not make peace until every soul who was shamed by their failure in the Mournwald has passed into or over the abyss. But they honour the Marchers, the Wintermarkers, and the Freeborn in their own way. Only when the Navarre take the field is this noble purpose swapped for savagery. Neither side seems able to tolerate the other's existence. Few would call the Grendel or the Thule honourable, but both of them honour their word. They keep faith with the agreements they have made. The Thule dragons and the Grendel salt lords seem to have an insatiable hunger for land and wealth, but they are as likely to negotiate as to fight. The Empire has forged a peace with both nations, and though the cost was bitter, against all odds that peace has persevered. None of these things are even remotely true of the Druge. As a people, they appear to be committed to cruelty and treachery. They enslave people, not to steal the fruits of their labour, but to immiserate them. They don't seek to conquer the Empire, they want to destroy it. Their rule is defined by misery, poverty, and fear. Now, for the first time in its history, the Empire seems to have the Druge on the run. Ossium was liberated first, and is now a thriving territory of Varushka. The Barons look set to fall soon. The Spires of Dusk are now in Imperial hands thanks to the sacrifice of the Hounds of Glory. Imperial spies have scouted the Sarengrave, seeking its secrets and its weaknesses. Raising a rebellion there would be difficult, but not impossible. The Empire have fought the Druge for the past 400 years, but rarely has anyone ever thought to question what might follow a victory. Defend what you hold dear. The General Assembly has thrown its support behind the words of Fintan Nighthaven, and made clear that the Empire should question the virtue of those who shout death to the Druge. False virtues follow in the footsteps of such a battle cry, and the Synod overwhelmingly rejected them. The vote was conflicted, though. When Lenarius and Carian urged the Empire to embrace their hatred of the Druge, it very nearly passed, despite the fact that it directly contradicted Fintan's judgment. When virtue falls silent, it allows blasphemy to speak. When virtue falls silent, we hear death to the Druge. Complacency has allowed malign forces to take root in the spirit of our citizens. In deepest consequence we bring the Bell, the Unconquered, and the Arbiter. They know the truth. We send Fintan Nighthaven with 150 doses of Liao to inspire every Imperial soldier in virtue to question what motivates them, and root out any corruption within. The Empire will defeat our enemies, but we must not sacrifice the way to achieve this. Let virtue speak. Victory to the Empire. Fintan Nighthaven, General Assembly, Winter Solstice 384 YE. Upheld 1594 to 367. The Druge enslave any peoples they can subjugate, and despoil any land they cannot hold. While they exist, the Empire's dreams of a world without slavery cannot be achieved, and ambition teaches us that obstacles to our goals must be removed, one way or another. Consequences are the price of ambition. We send Lenarius and Carian with 200 doses of Liao to encourage all citizens to focus their efforts on supporting the extermination of the Druge, wherever they may be found, and by any means necessary, until no trace of them is left upon the world. Lenarius Ancarian, General Assembly, Winter Solstice 384YE. Not upheld. 739 to 793. Lenarius Ancarian's judgment didn't get a greater majority. It didn't even get a simple majority, but it did get 739 votes in support of a judgment openly calling on the Empire to accept the influence of false virtues as a price worth paying to eliminate the Druge. And what of the military council? Not a single general called for death to the Druge. Were they swayed by the wise words of Fintan Nighthaven, or simply forced to bite their tongue for fear of the repercussions if they let their orders give voice to their true feelings? The Druge have fled Zenith, but we must not sit idle whilst their legacy remains. Whilst the architects set to rebuilding, we must not sit idle. As our senators call to our neighbours for aid, we must not sit idle. As magicians work the realms and sentinels pursue the enemy, we must not sit idle. I encourage all sword scholars to test what they have learned and apply themselves to cleanse what remains of the Druge and their legacy of fear and hatred. With sharpened blades and the light of truth and virtue, we will scour what remains of the Druge from Zenith. Herminius, House of the Wanderer, Urizen Assembly, Winter Solstice 384YE. Upheld. Greater majority, 276 to 0. We all know the cruelty and treachery the Druge are famed for, and the scars it had left on the people and lands of Zenith, as well as the lingering threat of their return. To give the good people of Urizen a chance to rebuild without the shadow of fear at their border and the worry of what treachery the Druge have left behind, we call on the vigilant citizens of the territory to be alert to all dangers, within and without. To root out Druge malice and keep watch for their movements. No plot shall escape the lantern light, and no vile machination will outwit the prepared. Bryce Tanner, Vigilance Assembly, Winter Solstice 384YE. Upheld. Greater majority, 185 to 0. The mandates in the General Assembly were not the only judgments on the Druge debated by the Synod. Both the Urizen Assembly and the Vigilance Assembly passed clear statements of principle, with greater majorities, urging the Empire to eradicate the menace posed by the Druge in Zenith. The Druge have been driven from Zenith with their tail between their legs, but have left behind a bitter legacy of deep scars. They have poured poison into the veins and arteries of the people and the land, but there is no military threat against Zenith at this time. Not unless you acknowledge that the Druge can never be truly beaten while even one of their armies can still take the field. Not unless you accept that there can never be peace while the rule of the Buruk Tepel endures anywhere on the Empire's borders. In theory, none of this matters. Fintan Nighthaven's mandate is decisive and has settled the issue, at least for now. The Empire will not exterminate the Druge if the price is embracing hatred. But what is the Empire to do with the Druge? There is scant evidence to suggest that the Empire can make a lasting peace with them. There's precious little to suggest that many in the Empire even want to. Fintan said, "The Empire will defeat our enemies, but we must not sacrifice the way to achieve this." How is this victory to be achieved, and what would it look like? Victory to the Empire. The Druge are cornered, their armies mauled and defeated in the Barrens. The Synod has agreed that the Empire must not embrace hatred or otherwise abandon the way. But there is pride in every defeat inflicted on the Druge. Vigilance demands this danger be uprooted and destroyed. Ambition hungers for the opportunity to permanently change the world for the better. The Empire could acknowledge the fact that the Druge are a threat like no other. People are wary of telling the military council how to do its job. More than once, the Synod has involved itself in the affairs of the generals, and there is a growing realization of the price that has exacted, given recent events. But if the Synod wish it, they could help people gain a better understanding of what is at stake in the war against the Druge. They could argue that the potential exists for victory, but only if they commit everything to the fight. That will involve sacrifices. In the war with the Jotun, in the negotiations with the Grendel, and in talks with the Thule. Perhaps even the Valorn should be left quiescent, if it meant the Druge could finally be defeated. No price is too high to realize our dreams. We send named priest with 100 doses of Liao to tell everyone that the final victory against the Druge is within our grasp if we commit ourselves to it utterly. Synod Mandate, General Assembly. If this mandate is enacted, then people will prioritize the war against the Druge over all other threats. For the next year, no statement of principle calling on the Empire to throw their support behind an enemy other than the Druge will lead to a mandate. Nor will statements of principle calling on people to oppose political settlements with any of the Empire's enemies bar the Druge, no matter what sacrifice is made. The Synod and the Empire will be sending a clear signal to the Military Council and the Senate, freeing their hands to seek victory over the Druge no matter what sacrifices must be made. Of course, that still leaves the question of what to do with the Druge once they are beaten, but perhaps that question can wait a little while longer, at least until victory is certain. Through hardship and misfortune. There is another perspective on the Druge, albeit not one that has a lot of support in the Empire at present. The claim is that the Druge are ultimately no different to the Jotun or to any of the threats that the Empire faces. The Empire has responded to the evil of the Druge, chasing one victory after another. They have won victories, but at what price? Faraz and Spiral languish under Grendel rule. Sir Masuak was nearly lost for a generation. It might never have been returned to imperial rule were it not for an alliance with the Thule. And even that came at a price, a swathe of territory across the north that struggles under the rule of the dragons of Otgadov. Every season has brought more sacrifices, until now the Hounds of Glory have been lost, all to win one more battle. How much more hardship and misfortune must the people of the Empire suffer purely because the Druge are black-hearted villains? The argument is that the Druge are not the greatest threat the Empire faces. The Jotun field more armies than the Malum. The Grendel have many allies and a powerful navy that grows more threatening by the day. If the Synod wish it, they could tell people that the Druge are remarkable only for the pettiness of their spirit and the smallness of their ambitions. The Military Council and the Senate should not put the destruction of the Druge before the salvation of the Empire. They should take wise choices that demonstrate their loyalty to every nation that is threatened. Wisdom is finding the right question. We send named priest with 100 doses of Liao to remind everyone that the Empire faces many great threats, and it is the duty of our Senate and Military Council to protect the whole Empire, not to bring ruin on the Druge. Synod Mandate, General Assembly. If this mandate is enacted, then people will refuse to prioritize the war against the Druge. Everyone wants to see the Druge defeated, but they are only one of the enemies the Empire faces. If the Druge are on the back foot, then that means the Empire can turn its gaze elsewhere. For the next year, no statement of principle calling on the Empire to fight the Druge will lead to a mandate, nor will statements of principle calling on people to oppose political settlements with the Druge. The Synod and the Empire will be sending a clear signal to the Military Council and the Senate, freeing them to agree to terms with the Druge if that is what the situation demands. This mandate will not settle the issue of what is to be done with the Druge once they are finally defeated for good. but it could well mean that that question doesn't need answering for another decade or more. Competing mandates. These General Assembly mandates are competing. Either the Imperial Synod urges people to accept any sacrifice needed to defeat the Druge, or they ask people to accept that the Druge are no bigger threat than any other the Empire faces. They cannot do both. As always, if multiple competing mandates are raised successfully, the one that achieved the highest margin of success will be the one that is considered to have been enacted. Alternative mandates. Fintan Nighthaven's mandate has decisively settled one issue. The Empire will not embrace hatred and strive to eradicate the Druge no matter the cost to their souls. While that closes one door, it still leaves a great many questions unanswered. The civil service have assessed two competing mandates the Synod could consider: to pursue all-out war against the Druge, but stop just short of embracing hate and seeking to eradicate them, or to accept that the Druge are not truly different to any of the threats the Empire faces and to treat them accordingly. Neither mandate answers the question of what the Empire might do if the Druge are finally defeated. Would they ever accept imperial rule? Could they even be trusted? Lenarius Ancarian's judgment was defeated, but was that because his vision of a world without the Druge was the wrong one, or did the Synod support the goal but balk at the cost to the Empire's soul? Can the Empire seek the utter destruction of the Druge without giving into hatred? Should that be the Empire's ambition? When people have questions, they look first to the Synod for answers. But there is too much uncertainty and too many unknowns for the civil service prognosticators to evaluate how the Empire might respond to a mandate that attempted to provide a definitive answer beyond the two starting points laid out here. The civil service could take alternative wording for either of these two outcomes if a priest of the Synod felt that that would provide more certainty. However, they cannot accept an alternative mandate, as they cannot determine how people might respond. Any priest who wishes to provide answers and guidance that go beyond the ones presented here must begin by passing a statement of principle laying out their position to demonstrate they have the Synod's support.